Another week, another win for the Detroit Lions as the win streak is now extended to 9 games. Welcome in to the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co host, Alex Drain. And Alex, no matter what the Lions do, they keep winning in convincing fashion.
Yeah, it's another week, another win. Was thinking about the concept of the Victory Monday, and how not all that long ago, it was really one of those things that those Mondays always felt materially better than the ones coming off losses. And now I think it's still true because I was pretty annoyed by that Buccaneers game, but we've gotten to the point where the Victory Mondays are so routine now that at least the specialness of the victory feeling is not there as much. It used to be that the feel of the win was equal to the the negative feelings of the loss, but now it's gotten to the point that the negative feelings of the loss is so much greater, so that the Victory Monday is now just, well, we don't have to feel that feeling because otherwise Victory Monday has become extremely usual, which is not something that maybe we ever thought we would say.
I mean, yeah, we're 2 years removed from this team going 9-8, and we're really not that far removed from the old Patricia or Caldwell years where 9 wins would be a good year. And now we're at the point where 9 wins is would be considered a massive disappointment. And the Lions are now 10-1, which best start in franchise history. If they are able to take care of business against the Bears on Thanksgiving, they would tie the franchise record for their longest win streak in a season at 10 games. Things are good right now. Things are very, very good right now. This game was maybe not as clean of an effort as you would have hoped. Certainly not as dominant of a game as we saw just a week ago against the Jags. But the defense certainly did their part. We'll get into that in a little bit. But they shut out every single AFC South team in the second half. Did not allow a second half point to that division, which I know most of that division is bad, but that's still pretty impressive. And you only allow 6 points. Very good defensive performance. Aaron Glenn really doing some good work in the middle part of this season. But we'll start on offense as we always do. This was a fine game for the offense. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a very good one. Jared Goff in particular, we talked about this privately, but just was a little off on some of his throws, specifically from a clean pocket, which you're really not used to seeing.
Yeah, he had that one miss to Laporta down the field that was an example of a throw that he usually makes. It's not like the easiest throw in the world because he did have to drop it in over the linebacker, but still something that we are very accustomed to see him make without pressure, and he just missed it. And it felt like as the game went along, he got a little jittery in the pocket. Like I thought early on, we talked about last week with the mobility was on display again in tiny amounts. He had a couple good navigations of the pocket where he moved around, and there was that throw to Tim Patrick over the middle that he found the angle on that I thought was pretty nice. So there were some moments there, but then later on, it just kind of felt like he was bailing a little early and like pulling the trigger on throwaways a little early. And in fairness, it did start from the beginning too. We should note because that first drive, he takes just an atrocious sack, a Caleb Williams special. When we get into
Mm,
the Bears later,
I
but
don't know if it was that bad.
he didn't lose 20 yards, but sacking yourself
Yeah.
on 3rd and 3 from the plus 37 when you have a good long range kicker and there wasn't really pressure, it was more of a coverage sack than anything else.
Yep.
Not good, not good. So it just was a little off the whole way, but overall, I mean, you look at the stats. 26 of 36 for 269. The 3 sacks are not great, but 7.5 yards an attempt. It's not like he turned it over a ton, although he got close to it with another kind of questionable decision to pull the trigger while he was feeling pressure, not from the blind side, but from the visible side, and it got batted out, and then the lineman fell on it, so the lineman dodged that bullet. But yeah, overall, not the cleanest game from him, but also not like an awful game. So I don't know. Shrug.
I think there's got to be a direct correlation between games in which Penei Sewell gives up a pressure or two to when Goff starts to feel jittery, because it really does feel like whenever Sewell locks everything down, that's when Goff is at his best because he doesn't see anyone coming off that edge. Sewell, I think he gave up the sack to Latu. Hasn't been quite as dialed in as a pass protector this season. Still the best run blocker in the league, but pass blocking, he's gotten beat a couple of times this season. Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, we know have had bit of a down year, especially Glasgow on the interior. I think it might have been Buckner that beat Graham so clean on one of those plays that forced Goff to step up into a Decker pressure. It was just not good all around. And I feel like there will be, we talked about the Eagles a lot on last episode and how the Lions would potentially stack up against them. I do not want to experience Jalen Carter bull rushing Graham Glasgow for however many minutes a game. That would not be a good time. But in general, whenever Sewell and the offensive line have had a bit of a down game, that's when Goff really gets rattled. We know that he's not great against pressure, specifically when a traditional pass rush can get pressure. Against the blitz, he can kind of prepare himself better. But on the plus side, the wide receivers were once again their usual good, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was Amon-Ra St. Brown. He made some nice catches. Jameson Williams has put together some, it's weird. We talk about him not being a jump ball threat, but Jameson Williams continues to put together some pretty good contested catches. And in this game, he has another, I think, 4 for 60 yards or something. He crosses the 600-yard plateau as his breakout season continues. Amon-Ra, again. But the ground game is where all the touchdowns came from. Montgomery gets banged up. Jahmyr Gibbs, another pretty good game. Wasn't dominant by any stretch, but I don't know. I think, would you agree with the assessment that the run game was good enough to win?
Yeah, yeah, they definitely delivered the punches when it was needed. You look at that first drive, or this is the second drive, the first touchdown drive, where Gibbs picks up a 3rd and 8, and then he finishes, the drive with the touchdown, and then later on he has the 3rd touchdown drive. It's a sprint right up the gut, and then finishes it off with the bounce touchdown to the corner. He gets the taunting flag for staring the defender down as he backpedals into the end zone. But thought it was a good game from Gibbs overall. It wasn't like a highly explosive run game, but you look at it and you see Gibbs 4.3 yards per carry, Montgomery 4.6 yards per carry. Gibbs' longest was 17, Montgomery's longest was 13. So it was one of those games where if we went, on the nitty gritty analytics box score, I'd imagine their success rate was very high, but their explosive rate, was pretty low. They weren't ripping off 30, 40-yard runs like we've seen at points this season, but down to down, they had some decent success. And Montgomery had a great run on a 3rd and 6. I thought his touchdown run was great. And he had a nice catch on the play he got injured on, where he bounces off tacklers and keeps going in that screen pass. And he comes up and immediately calls for help and then goes off. And they said it was a shoulder injury, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, but he went back in uniform. He could have come back in, but they didn't, which was the right call. So overall, I thought they were fine. Did their job. Like, this was just a game from the offense where you step back and you look at it and you see 390 yards on 5.4 yards per play. And you look at that and you're like, not really a big issue for concern here. But it wasn't quite as dominant as we've seen. There were some drives that they moved the ball and then weren't able to actually hit points off of it, like that first drive where they ended up having to punt from plus territory. There were some Buccaneers vibes, but not in the red zone, just farther back, although there was one red zone situation we can get to. But just a good day from the offense, but not a great day. And most weeks they're great. And I think that was kind of the disconnect.
Yeah, it kind of is just one of those games. The Colts, for what it's worth, they did a very good job when they knew the run was coming. The Lions' best runs of the day came on those 3rd and longs where The Colts obviously were expecting pass because it's 3rd and long. Why would you expect a run? Which the Lions have got several teams with that kind of concept throughout the Dan Campbell era so far. And I mean, yeah, we'll talk about maybe the 4th and 1 in a little bit. The botched short yardage play where the Colts are just ready for it. And the first down, we talk about success rate. The first down success rate, I imagine, would be significantly lower than the 2nd and 3rd down success rate for the run, because that's when the Colts were stacking the box more. That's when their defensive linemen were able to they got a lot more lateral jump off the line against those run plays on first down, which really put some of the Lions stuff kind of behind the line of scrimmage. But we've talked about this before as well. The lateral stuff, it really was not working in this game. There was a number of negative runs to the outside where it's just like, just go up the middle. Why the theatrics? Just up the middle or behind Penei Sewell. Why are we trying to stretch outside of the tackles when the linebackers are doing so well in pursuit? It just, I don't know. It's a little bit overthinking by Ben Johnson a little bit.
Yeah, I will say this wasn't the most creative Ben Johnson game. It kind of made me wonder if they have a trick player or two ready for Chicago, because most weeks we've gotten accustomed to seeing something at some point, and this was a pretty milquetoast one where we didn't really see a whole lot in that regard. But short week, maybe I mean, this was the definition of a trap game, right? Like we talked about this last week. You've got a short week upcoming against a division opponent. Then after that, you have increasingly difficult games against pretty good to very good teams like the Packers, and then the Bills after that. So this was the one that was fairly easy to overlook, and there were parts that did feel a little crappy, or just in the sense that they hadn't prepared as much specifically for the Colts, and then it kind of turned into a slog. But the weird nature of this game is that there was grumbling overall, there was grumbling during the game, and yet they still won by 18 points and solidly outgained the Colts. So I don't know. Weird one from a judgmental standpoint. I do want to note on the topic of wide receivers that this might have been Tim Patrick's best game. Had 4 catches, 55 yards in the box score, and they were all fairly important catches. Just continues to quietly do his role. He's now up to 19 catches for 258 on the season, and 19 catches on 23 targets. I mean, when they throw it to him, it usually works. He gets 2 or 3 a game, generally speaking, and continues to just be a really solid member of the team.
Yeah, like when he came aboard, the whole message was he might take a few weeks to get up to speed, and then you just need to match the Josh Reynolds pace to be effective. I don't know how many catches did Reynolds have last year? It was like 30 or something.
Let me look. I assume he's a bit behind that pace just because.
Yeah, JMO is
he
existing.
Yeah, JMO's more a bigger part of the rotation, and also remember Josh Reynolds had a chemistry with Goff built up over many seasons. They were buddies, and Patrick kind of joined the team in the middle of the season, so that takes some time. Let's see. Reynolds had 40 catches last season in 17 games, so yeah, that's a pretty similar pace to Patrick. Maybe a little shorter in yardage, but as a whole, I think he's done what we asked for from him.
I honestly, the biggest difference is the touchdowns. Tim Patrick has not emerged as the red zone threat yet. He was so close to getting one against Dallas, but there was the old Josh Reynolds special where he would just leak out into the back of the end zone and be open by 15 yards on a 3rd and goal from the 2. We're still waiting for something like that to happen for Tim Patrick, but I mean, in general, the Lions goal to go run game has been so dominant that who needs to throw it on the goal line? I will say, I think it's been a bit of a weird year because the concern with the wide receivers coming into the year, because we need to have a good wide receiver too, and all of a sudden your top 3 targets are probably wide receivers. Sam Laporta has kind of been relegated to a 4th target, maybe even 5th behind the running backs, because Goff has just been so comfortable spreading the ball to all these different receivers. Not really a need to throw to the tight end as much. Obviously, Sam Laporta is still very capable. That rapport with Goff seems to be a little off so far this season, possibly due to injury, the recent injury and missing a couple practices, but obviously not nearly as dominant of a Laporta season in his sophomore year compared to his rookie breakout. But I don't know, is what it is. Can't really complain when the team's winning and all the passing game is mostly working very well.
Yeah, I mean the offense is right at the top of the NFL, so
Yeah,
if Laporta's not, a huge part of that, so be it. He probably will be in future years. It's fine. I think overall with Patrick, you just wind the clock back to the preseason. Our worry was really that he wouldn't have enough in the tank. My worry was that the Patrick idea would be like what we have seen with Allen Robinson, where it's like,
yeah,
he's kind of cooked. Like not really getting open when you throw him the ball. He's dropping it sometimes. Just not a factor in any way. But Patrick has looked very much like a credible NFL wide receiver number 3. Like done his job, been perfectly fine, and that's a very nice outcome from his vantage point there. And we also should mention on the injury topic, Khalif Raymond had an injury. I believe that was on a punt return,
I believe so.
right?
Yeah, a foot
Yeah, because
injury.
he had one target in the box score as a wide receiver, but the focus will fall on how they'll handle punt returns, which we'll get into in special teams. But there's also now an opportunity for a wide receiver, 4 to step up and take a role there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on that front.
Yeah, is Isaiah Williams still with the team or did they waive him?
No, unfortunately, he is with the Cincinnati Bengals now.
Right,
But
he got cut.
EPJ is still on the practice squad if we're looking for a punt returner. But
Eh, give it to Vaki, honestly.
yeah,
I I'm just trying to think like for Khalif's role as a wide receiver, like which shifty slot type would be called up from the practice squad? Are we back in Tom Kennedy territory?
possibly.
I guess we'll see. But yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Aside from that, I don't know. Not much to say about. Well, not much to say. We went for 15 minutes about the offense, but I think that's probably it.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine.
So turning over to the defense, Aaron Glenn is quickly becoming one of the hottest head coaching candidates in the league. In the interesting thing is when the defense was bad, he was still getting head coaching buzz because he's such a good leader. And now the defense is actually playing good. They've gone 10 quarters without allowing a touchdown. They have not allowed a touchdown in back-to-back games. They, as I mentioned off the top, they have shut out every AFC South team in the second half. I think they're top 5 in points against. I'm pretty sure. Let me confirm that real quickly.
They are second in
They're second
defense.
They are. I think they're second in EPA per play defensively, first against the pass. This defense, and now granted, they do give up some yards every now and again, but the red zone is where they really make their money. They've really done a great job of stifling teams in the red zone. We saw that on the Colts opening drive where they had a lot of nice schemed up things and they get down to the red zone and then nothing. And that's kind of the story of the Lions defense. Bend but don't break, except actually done well. And even without Aiden Hutchinson, pass rush was okay. Aleem McNeil had a great game. Gave Quentin Nelson one of the worst PFF games of his career. Who, Quentin Nelson, is he as dominant as he used to be? No, but he's still a very good lineman. It's the rest of the Colts front, no, but this defense is starting to look more and more legit by the week.
Yeah, it is. This was a pretty good game from them, I thought. The red zone defense is the interesting point here because you just look at them and as you mentioned, they do give up yards. Like in this game, you look at the box score, like, oh wow, they gave up 5.5 yards per play, blah blah blah. But you kind of break it down, and the Colts had a good garbage time drive against borderline practice squad corners. I think by that point it was Dorsey and Vildor as the corners on that last drive. And the scripted drive worked for the Colts. I saw the stat during the game that I think Lions have now given up a score on the opening drive on 8 of the last 10 games, which something to file away. They perhaps haven't been as sharp in those situations with the scripted stuff, but otherwise, like overall, it was fine. Pretty good showing, and they on some occasions allow you to drive the field, but they are number 2 in red zone defense in terms of allowing touchdown percentage. They're number 4 in red zone offense and touchdown percentage as well, by the way. But they don't give up a lot of touchdowns in the red zone. They're one of the best at that, and they also don't give up a lot of explosive long touchdowns either. Like you scroll back through these last few games, the last time they gave up a touchdown of over 20 yards, I believe, was that run against the Vikings where they totally blew it. The Aaron Jones like 34-yard run early on in that game. Like they don't give up big play touchdowns, and they don't give up red zone touchdowns. So the ultimate conclusion there is you don't give up many points, and that's why they're second in the scoring defense numbers. As for this game itself, the elephant in the room that has to be discussed is the Vildor experience. We discussed it last week a bit as a possibility. I think it was the garbage time last week we saw Vildor, but now he's back as a potential starter because of the Terrion Arnold ailment, and not good. Not good
No.
at all.
There are a lot of people that owe Terrion Arnold an apology after this game. Look, Kendall Vildor, he last year when he, came to Detroit, everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, cool, that's more corner depth. You can never have too many corners." And then he got thrust into a starting role, and everyone quickly realized, "Oh boy, we are in trouble at corner." And then they went on to almost make the Super Bowl before Vildor had one of the most I don't want to say most iconic like LOL moments, but considering the situation, that was certainly one of the more interesting Lions gaffes of recent memory with the face mask ball up to Ayuk. So then you come into this year, you've completely overhauled the corner room. It wasn't a sure thing that Vildor would even make the team. Makes the team out of camp, and you progress through the season. Injuries have come up. The Lions' top 3 corners are now injured, which we'll talk about Carlton Davis in a little bit. And Vildor is suddenly your CB1, potentially on Thanksgiving Day, which is not a spot you want to be in, considering. And I think he gave up like 3 catches for 65 yards. It should have been 4 for like 100 and something, because there was another huge play that the Colts receiver just inexplicably did not get his feet in. That's something that Jameson Williams we criticized for not doing, right, over the weeks of the season. Receiver has to get the feet in there. Vildor got completely torched. And then through in the latter part of the game, when the Lions are just trying to drain the rest of the time, they just throw 2 safeties back there, and so that Joseph and Branch can kind of take care of Dorsey and Vildor over the top. But it was not good. There was also one early in the game, which technically was not against Vildor, but he passed off a receiver to Robertson very late, where Robertson was completely stopped, and Vildor's like, "Oh yeah, you got it," and it turns into an easy completion. It just was certainly not great, and I would be very happy if Terrion could come back. I'd be very happy if Carlton was okay. I'm really sad that Rakestraw is on IR right now, because man, this would have been a great chance to see him as well.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing you notice in this game with Vildor compared to Arnold is we've seen Arnold have his ups and downs at times this year, but you see the big difference between guy that can play in the NFL and a guy that can't, in the sense that when Arnold's out there, the quarterback's reading the field. He's looking at the different options, then he's throwing. Sometimes it's open against Arnold, and if it is, then he'll throw it. This is different because every single time they were going at Vildor, I mean, it just was repeated, and I think they might have had one target in Davis's vicinity. I mean, they didn't even bother with who Davis was covering. Like, it was just, boom, we are throwing at Vildor over and over and over again. And when you're getting picked on relentlessly like that, it's because there's an obvious matchup weakness, and the teams all know it, and that's the real problem with it. And I thought he also had the The one in the first half where they get the Colts backed up on a 1st and 18, and then he just immediately gives up like a 25-yard catch where he's playing off coverage and he still is totally lost on the move the receiver makes, and it's rough. And they bring Mosley back for this game, but they want to ease him in. They don't want to go in and place him right in Vildor's spot. But by the second half of that game, it felt pretty frustrating to have him out there, to be honest. Like they just didn't, especially then after the Davis injury, they had to. They were just so short on options. But this guy's pretty bad, and it's again remarkable what they were able to accomplish last season in the playoffs when they were having him play that amount, because it's just so obvious that he is overwhelmed at an NFL level.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not we talk about the Bears as, they're the Bears. We laugh at them a lot, but they certainly have some talented wide receivers. This is and considering Chicago's kind of taken it to the Lions over the last few seasons, and Thanksgiving has been a boogeyman of sorts for Detroit. This is not like you talk about trap game, going into a game against a trio of wide receivers that all have talent, a young quarterback that has shown improvement over the course of the season. Again, we'll talk about that later. But man, that this game on Thursday is suddenly like the Lions are favored by I think 11 points right now. I'm rushing to bet Chicago to cover that spread because I do not think the game will be a blowout by any means. I think that this will be a uncomfortably close game if the Packers and Vikings are any evidence of what divisional matchups can do, no matter the any perceived skill gap with the teams, and the injuries are corner mounting and mounting just will not help matters whatsoever.
Yeah, I will get into the Bears later. It definitely on paper is a potential issue there at the corner spot. But, outside of the Vildor thing, it was a fine day overall. They had some issues with Anthony Richardson running on that scripted drive. After that, they really didn't. There was one other chunk run in, I think, in the second half, but the other times that Richardson had design keepers, they were cued in on those really quickly. And on that first drive, they get moved down the field, but then they get turned a 2nd and 1 at the 3-yard line into 3rd and 6, and then they force a field goal. So give them credit for that. Nice recovery there. What did you think, by the way, on Anthony Richardson in this game? Because this is the first time I really watched a full game of his, and I kind of understand some of the contradictions because I come away from this game, you look at the box score, was not a particularly impressive box score. He ends up completing only 11 of 28 passes. And yet I came away being like, I didn't think he was that bad. I thought he was actually pretty impressive at points. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know what to think at this point.
So I think the best way I can sum up Anthony Richardson, the Jets game was an anomaly. That was they had a completely different game plan. They executed things a lot differently in that game. They reverted back to the early season form, which is look, Anthony Richardson is capable of making some incredible splash plays. He's got the cannon arm. He can chuck it 80 yards downfield. He's huge. He can run. He breaks tackles. He breaks sacks. He's very difficult to bring down. The thing is, for as much fun as the highlights are, he doesn't make hit the down to down throws like within 10 yards with enough consistency to where the splash plays hitting or missing will matter that much. He's in a situation like this, the flashes of brilliance are there. The problem is the consistency isn't. So when he's not hitting those big splash plays, nothing's happening. So that's where you get these wildly bad completion percentages, is because he's just chucking it downfield, and if he's not chucking it downfield, he's missing an open pass that's 7 yards away. It's almost
Yeah,
like the
although
all gas no brakes.
yeah, although I thought in this game I was expecting some throws into the ground and some like
Mm,
completely wild, and I felt like he wasn't that far off. Like he had some
no.
misses that were like, oh man, that was really close. And The other thing I'll note, just in my thought of watching this game, is like the Colts team around him is like sucks. Like they're the offense outside of Jonathan Taylor. Like we talked last week, those wide receivers are not that exciting, and he throws a touchdown, and the guy drops it on that the second drive, the one that got the
Yeah.
field goal. So he definitely had some bad luck against, and then get to the second half where he's really completing very few passes, and there's pressure on almost every play, and so he takes like a grounding on a play where there's a guy right in his lap, and he's just sort of throwing it aimlessly to no one. And I think for a developmental player like him, he needs more help. He needs more structure, and but it is there. Potential is definitely there. I was overall somewhat encouraged, but like you mentioned, Ali McNeil dominant in this game, was just living around Richardson, and I thought it was a really good game from Zadarius Smith as well. I thought the defensive line as a whole had a strong game, but those two guys stood out from a pass rushing
Mhm.
standpoint. This might have been the Lions' best pass rushing game since the Hutchinson injury, just in an organic sense. So it was nice to see that, and it certainly did no favors to Richardson.
Yeah, so I mean, you feel for him because he's got an undrafted rookie at right guard starting. He's got a backup center in. He's got a backup tackle in against a Lions front that is very good against the run. So Jonathan Taylor was a non-factor in this game, which is really the biggest threat. So you take that away, and all of a sudden you're relying on the big game hunting from Richardson, and it just didn't happen. At least not enough to where like there was a few plays that were almost talked about the one on Vilder that was just out of bounds. Vilder also almost got beat by Alec Pierce in the first quarter, I believe, on a deep shot that it might have been McNeil or no, it was Reeder got a hand on Richardson to disrupt the throw just a little bit, which saved the Lions an 80-yard touchdown. So I don't know, like Richardson, one of those guys where the potential is there, just need to see it on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, and I think overall on this side of the ball, other notes, I didn't have much on Kirby Joseph. Davis, as I mentioned, was rarely targeted. Robertson got beat in like a mesh route in man coverage, which goes sometimes. Otherwise, not a ton on him. They gave a game ball in the locker room to Malcolm Rodriguez, and I think that was deserved. Thought he had a nice game. Campbell as well. I think overall through 11 games, one of the unsung heroes is Malcolm Rodriguez.
Yep.
Like the progression of him, he has the promising rookie year, then kind of gets pushed into the background last season, really more of a special teams guy for a lot of the year. But this year he's come back as a starter, and he has been very capable. And that's become very useful when Anzalone goes down, and so far so good from him. So nice day from him. And McNeil, we should note too, had a forced fumble on a Richardson
Mm-hmm.
scramble, one that the Colts fell on, but nice punch out there.
Yeah, and I forget it might have been McNeil or Reeder. The on the the Colts. I think sorry, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. The biggest problem for Anthony Richardson, his coaching staff, because they late in the game, I think it might have been 21-6 at this point, and the Colts have a 3rd and 10 from the Lions. I think it was right around midfield, a 3rd and 10. So naturally, you run QB power and like the defensive line, to their credit, got off their blocks quickly. They shut it down for a gain of like 2 or 3. Colts punt, and that was the end of the game. Like any semblance of life that the Colts had was killed on that play because yeah, I know Colts fans were up in arms about how bad the coaching staff was and how undisciplined the team was.
Yeah.
So, certainly not ideal, but from a Lions perspective, very dominant Aleem game. Levi Onwuzurike, should note, he had one QB hit in this game. Um, his snap counts have been going down over the last few weeks. Nice to see him get a couple pass rush wins in this game.
Yeah, favorable matchup with the weakness of the interior O line for the Colts. I have two other notes on this side of the ball. Not a good Brian Branch game, honestly.
Nope.
Had a couple instances where he went for the big hit and it didn't work. He had one in coverage and he just kind of bounces off the guy and ends up picking 25 yards on what should have been a 10-yard play. And then he went for the big hit on Richardson on a run in the second half and got run over, just smoked as Richardson keeps going. So you need to be a little cleaner with your tackling. Like just wrap him up, have better fundamentals there. He takes a penalty later for leading with the head. Just not sharp. But my other note on this, and this is back to the Richardson thing that I do want to mention when you brought up the penalties, which were a very prominent portion of this game. Colts had a lot of issues with flags, but I follow like one or two people who are Colts fans, so sometimes Colts stuff pops up on my feed, and all these people in the game were talking about like, oh, Anthony Richardson today had gains of 21, 15, 11, and 32, all nullified by penalties or whatever. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, so nullified by penalties is like, okay, he makes a nice play and it was an illegal formation because someone was covered up, right? Like just some dumb thing, illegal shift. Like, okay, we can talk about that kind of thing. But like some of these that were being referenced are like, if the offensive line commits a holding directly related to your ability to escape the pocket and then you make a nice play, you were not robbed of a good gain. You were
If your
gifted that
wide
gain
if your
by
wide
the penalty.
receiver commits an offensive pass interference on a pick play, if the receiver is open as a result of a pick play, that is not nullified.
I will say on that pick play, I don't think it was as erroneous as the broadcast made it seem, but it is interesting that we've gone from a time in the NFL where the pick plays worked almost 100% and they were never called to this now where like that one definitely was a pick play, but it wasn't like as obvious as some of them you've seen. Like he didn't, a lot of times, right? If you extend the arms or you like kind of intentionally, like he was just kind of like, oh, here, and then it was enough of a rub to get it open. It's just funny that they've gotten to the point now where that one gets flagged. Where there was a point in time where you could almost tackle the guy and it wouldn't get called.
Yeah, we're in a day and age now in the NFL where the pick plays that are going to have to, like, in order to do a pick play, it's not going to have the receiver can't run a stop where
Yeah.
the at the point of
That's the
contact.
argument there is he didn't really run a route necessarily.
Yeah, you're going to see more pick plays where the one receiver is running more of a drag or slant across and just runs like adjusts it to run in the path of where the DB is, but he's running a route. And you'll see a lot more of forcing the DB just to trail underneath the chaos. And it won't lead to 10 yards of separation, but it might lead to 3 or 4, which in the NFL is way wide open. So it's going to have to be an adjustment league wide. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It's just going to be something over the next few years that you're going to see from offensive coordinators. Yeah. So that's it for the defense. Now, special teams, should note Jake Bates, another long field goal, 56 yarder. Drills
56. Yep, and that was a big kick. Like the score was 21-6, so it was still a 2-score game. 3 points made a 3-score game, kind of closed the book on it, and he had no problem drilling that one through. Also made a 48-yard field goal, or 48-yard extra point after the kids taunting. So continues to show off his range, and I will say to this point, where is this on the Bates outcome-o-meter? Like this, if we go back to the preseason, this feels very close to a 95th percentile outcome.
Yeah, like we have one missed PAT in the Seahawks game, was it?
I believe so, yes, and 0 missed field goals.
Like, as some of those, like he's got 4 or 5 from 50 plus. He knows a 48-yard extra point. He's made some incredibly clutch kicks this season.
Yep.
Like, I'd argue maybe even higher than 95th percentile.
Yeah, could be 98th, 99. The only way I think it could be higher, obviously, is if he'd made all the extra points and like maybe if he had a 63 3-yarder or something like that. But now that, because remember early in the year, he was mostly making short kicks. And then,
Yeah.
like, after the bye week, suddenly he's making the longer ones. And so now we've gotten to the point where the distance is pronounced and we're seeing the whole range shown off. I mean, this is as close to as good as you could have imagined from Bates to this point. So shout out to him for another strong game.
Yep. Knock on wood that it continues. Now, returner. I briefly mentioned that I think Vaki should get that role, but what would your top three choices be to replace Khalif in that punt return role for however long he's out? Let's say it's the rest of the regular season.
Uh, I think Vaki's up there. Did Vaki return punts in the preseason?
I think he was the other kick returner.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But if he's comfortable returning punts, I think Vaki's the obvious guy in terms of his skill set and the athleticism and some of the wiggle we've seen from him. Beyond that, would be like promoting someone from the practice squad next. I really don't want Amon Ra out there.
No.
He did a fine job in this game standing in. He had a fair catch. He had one return where he just ran straight to the sideline, got some yards, went out of bounds. Exactly what you want to see. But Vaki, a practice squad guy. After that, I don't know. Don't really want to use any of the DBs either. I mean, maybe if someone like Brandon Joseph could do it, then that's something that you
Dorsey,
might
maybe?
consider. But yeah, Dorsey's a possibility. I mean, he's been on special teams for a while and is
He has a
very
60
familiar
yard
with
kick
that
return this
aspect of the
year.
game. Yes, he does. So certainly a
I
possibility.
There will definitely be a subsection of fans that are like JMO, JMO. But for as much fun as that would be, no.
Yeah, and I feel like JMO is a much more obvious kick returner, right? Like
Yeah.
the kick returner is usually the straight line sprinter. Punt returner is usually the guy with like more agility and
Hmm.
ability to kind of make guys miss in a small space. So, but absolutely keep the wide receivers to the sideline on special teams return units. Amon Ra being used in this game was fine. You needed someone to get
Yeah.
you through the game, but now it's time to pivot elsewhere and come up with some other solutions. I do want to note on the topic of punt returning, the Colts punter was really good in this game. He
Hmm.
had a bomb of a leg and was flipping the field, so give him a shout out.
Yep. Hang time was good too. The coverage was able to catch up most of the time. Um, on the flip side, Jack Fox, not his best yardage game, but every punt was inside the 20. He got a game ball from Dan Campbell after the game. Aside from that, special teams did their jobs, which can't really complain about. They've been pretty good at limiting returns all season, with the exception of one at the end of the first half against Dallas. Don't think there's been any other notable returns aside from that, so not too much to complain about.
No, and I mean Fox in this game was punting more from midfield, which he doesn't
Yeah.
usually do a lot of because the Lions are usually going for it on those situations, but again, all inside the 20, zero touchbacks, fine with me.
Yeah. So now, do you have any game theory notes?
Yeah, we do have to talk about the fourth down. They go on fourth down. The situation is 4th and 1 at the plus 14, up 14-6 with 9:58 remaining in the third quarter. First of all, on the decision, go for it.
Go for it. I understand if there are people that would have preferred to take the 11-point lead at that time, but 4th and 1 in the red zone. The Lions are always going to go for that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought is that I definitely see the argument for kicking two-score game or to make it a two-score game. On the other hand, it's their identity, right? Like this is the same thing when we go back to the NFC Championship game from last year and people that barely watched the Lions suddenly weighing in with their takes and it's like be who you are.
Yeah.
Win or lose based on who you are. This is their identity. They always go for those. It's been a huge part of their success. I got no issue going for it. Unfortunately, it was a situation where we talk about in this game, the Colts were really good in rushing situations where it is kind of telegraphed, and the Lions really do nothing notable there, and the Colts just tee off on it. They're aggressive. It's a gap play where they're pulling Glasgow, but they're trying to run behind the left side. Decker, Laporta kind of get pushed back. There's not a lot of push in the middle either. The one hole that's created is immediately filled by Zaire Franklin screaming through it like a shot out of a cannon, and it's just dead in the water overall. I think, you know, 4th and 1, if you don't sneak it, sometimes the football gods will punish you for your crimes. That's my look at it.
And to go one step further, if you're in a 4th and 1 and you're running a slow developing counterplay, you
Yeah,
deserve everything that's coming for you. If you want to run it with Montgomery because Goff took a lot of hits in this game, run power, run dive, run something that's just straight up. Put your 6 or 7 guys on the line and dare the Colts to beat you. Because
yeah. I mean, if they go out there and beef it up and run wedge or something like that to just dive it in and get the first down, probably would work because they, you know, had a pretty good game run blocking overall when the Colts aren't loading up. I probably would have called, play action,
yeah,
whether the old
Brock Wright
well of tight
special.
end league, or you give off a bootleg opportunity where he runs out and you have someone spring in the flat, just something like that, because the Colts were so keyed in on those situations that
Yeah.
you go against tendency there and you probably get it. But at the end of the day, that wasn't super consequential, and they gave the Colts backed up field position. They were able to get the ball back and they score a touchdown in pretty short order. So,
Yeah.
end of the day, not the biggest deal.
No, but it just speaks to the fact that this wasn't the best Ben Johnson game. The creativity wasn't quite as on point as it has been throughout the season and throughout his Lions tenure. You expect him to, quite frankly, be better than that and know better than to call something like counter in a counter pull in that situation. But is what it is. On to next week, basically.
Yep.
Now, we'll get to the next week for the Lions in a second. As always, we have to visit some storylines from around the NFL. And man, the Lions game ends. I turn on Red Zone, and all hell broke loose for like 20 minutes in the NFL again. It's the second time this season where the last 20 minutes of the early slate of games was the most chaotic, entertaining thing on planet Earth, and is exactly why Red Zone exists. Now, starting with, I'll start with the wackiest one: the Dallas Cowboys and Washington Commanders. So, Dallas is up by 3. Cavante Turpin drops the kick return, gets it back, picks it up at his own 1 yard line, does a spin move on nobody, and then just sprints 95 yards to the house untouched. One of the weirdest kick returns, borderline Deshaun Jackson level shenanigans happening there. So they're up by 10. Commanders go down, they score, garbage time touchdown, whatever. Failed onside kick, but they call their 2 timeouts. They get the ball back at like their 10-yard line with 14 seconds left. Surely they can't keep getting away with this, right? Except then Jaden Daniels uncorks a bomb to Terry McLaurin, who just runs through everyone, untouched to the end zone, so inexcusable by the Dallas defense, only to then miss the extra point.
So the funniest thing about that whole sequence is the throw to McLaurin, because that isn't a Hail Mary. It is a
No.
situation where if he is tackled in bounds, the game's over, because there's no way in the world that Washington is able to get up there and spike that ball in the time that was remaining, and yet they can't tackle him. He sprints into the end zone, and then you have the missed extra point. It just But the other thing about this game too is this game was a snoozer for a lot of the game. I've
Mm-hmm.
When I was flipping over to Red Zone like throughout the contest, that game for like a lot of the game was like 10-9, like 7-6. Like it just nothing was going on in that game, and then suddenly it just erupts in the final moments. I mean, it was 13-9, well into the fourth quarter, and then final score 34-26.
Now, granted, that 34 comes because the Dallas player decided to return the onside kick, have his little.
Which that should be mentioned too, where he needs to fall down there. Like
Yeah,
obviously we're talking, outcome percentage win probability is 99 versus 100, let's say, between the two things. But still, everyone in the Cowboys team is like, just fall down, fall down, fall down, and then we'll kneel it out. And instead, he runs it right into the end zone and gives Washington the ball back in a one-score game.
I don't know who scored that touchdown. I'm willing to bet that will be the only touchdown scored in his career. So I understand the impulse that, hey, you have a shot to score a touchdown if you're a practice squad, special teams, defensive player. This is not something that you're accustomed to. I understand the impulse, but yeah, go down there. Here's a game theory question though. You're Washington. Terry McLaurin just defied every piece of logic out there and scores a touchdown. Go for two. Yes or no?
See, I say no though, because the reason is because you're the better team, right? Like that's the if the roles are reversed and you are Dallas, you 100% go for two, like not even a question. But I feel like as Washington, you're at home, you feel like you're supposed to win this game. I feel like rolling the dice going to overtime is an okay thing because it's like, well, we just got to stop Cooper Rush and you keep him out of the end zone, we'll drive and win the game. So there's an argument to it, but again, just playing the probabilistic side, I think generally you don't.
I think based on pure vibes and momentum, you ride that energy. You trust your offense to get. Yeah, I would trust Jaden Daniels to get you 2 yards and punch it in.
That is fair.
Like at the end of the day, we talked about this with the Bucks when they played the Chiefs and elected to go to overtime instead of going for two, citing the weather as the concern. I will always choose the option to get 2 yards versus having to potentially stop the other team and then drive all the way down the field.
Yeah, and I think to that point, the argument of going for two is enhanced when you have a running quarterback because they can often bail you out in those situations if you roll them out or you give them the option to run or throw. It can end up working out in your favor, but crazy game overall. All that said, before things got bananas, kind of another is Daniels healthy? What's going on with Cliff Kingsbury situation in this game?
Second half of the year.
Washington had 9 points for about 50%, 50 minutes out of the 60-minute game. So, yeah. And with Washington falling to 7-5, the Eagles winning again against the Rams on Sunday night, kind of feels like the NFC East is over. Yeah. I mean, not like totally, but it getting late early on that race.
Commanders would probably have to, if not run the table, win 5 of 6 to close out the year. So
probably not happening. So bummer for them, but they'll still probably make the playoffs. So at least they have that consolation prize, unless things really get away from them. I mean, their schedule's easy. The flip side of that is that beating Dallas at home was easy. So and they didn't do it.
So we'll see. They've got a rematch against Philly in a few weeks. We'll see what happens there, but certainly not boding well for their chances to win the division or their outlook in the playoffs. Now, as for another wacky finish that hits a little bit closer to home for Lions fans, Chicago, you had one job: to make us laugh like we have not laughed in so long. The Minnesota Vikings holding a 10-point lead with 30 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. Surely that lead is safe, except the Chicago Bears score a touchdown and actually recover the onside kick. I think it hit backup tight end. Is it Oliver, the backup tight end? Bears recover. Caleb Williams then proceeds to make his best throw as an NFL quarterback to date, layers it perfectly over a couple of linebackers and under the safeties to DJ Moore. They get up, spike it, field goal, go to overtime. And then he takes the most inexplicable sack I've seen from an NFL quarterback this season.
Yeah, just I think the Vikings win probability was well over 99% before the late touchdown there. Well, also by the way, the Vikings were up 27-16. So in the span of 30 seconds, they get a touchdown, a 2-point conversion, recovered onside kick, made field goal, and they won the coin toss. They perfect situation. You're at home, you have all the momentum, you're getting the ball first. Let's just drive down the field, win the game. And instead, horrendous sack, minus 12 yards. Then they take a delay of game that backs them up even further to 26 yards. They punted away. Darnold thunder sacked by Montez Sweat on the first play of that drive. Nearly strip sack. I mean, Montez came around that blind side with a great punch attempt, couldn't quite get it free. Then, okay, 2nd and 17. They concede a short pass. Hawkinson gets the lost yardage back. 3rd and 10. They don't even cover Addison. Not even close. Vikings pick it up. Then you get a false start. Okay, 1st and 15. 20-yard pass to Jefferson. Like, it just... the Bears just could not help themselves. They get into 2nd and 11 around midfield. They leave Hawkinson wide open over the middle for a 12-yard
Wide
pickup.
open.
Like no one even in the vicinity. 2nd and 8 at Chicago 38. Hawkinson, again, open. Like, it just... I don't know. The Bears, 4-7 now. They're on a 5-game losing streak. They still have a positive point differential for the season because they just keep losing in ridiculous fashion. Of the last 5 losses, you have the blocked field goal game, you have this overtime game, and you have the Hail Mary game in 3 of the last 5 games.
I don't think there is a team in the NFL this season that has done a better job of giving their fans hope just to snatch it away in the most just bizarre ways possible. You've lost on a Hail Mary, a blocked field goal, and overtime after you had the ball first. How? There's
snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, as they say.
The margins are so razor thin. This could have been a 7-4 team. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But alas, they're 4-7. Granted, a couple of the games in that 5-game win streak have been stinkers. The Cardinals and Patriots games were brutal for them. We'll see how they fare on Thanksgiving. Divisional game. They should be able to keep that close. We'll see. Yeah. Then another overtime finish. For any Lions fan that has gotten upset about the Lions maybe not being as dialed in as they should be offensively or whatever, maybe this game was a little bit more closer than they wanted it to be. Yeah, go look at the Chiefs because they almost blew a game to Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, which, by the way, Bryce Young has taken a step. He has taken...
quick clarification. This was not an overtime game. The Chiefs...
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. Basically
tied in the final month. Essentially an overtime game.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Bryce Young, I thought, from what I saw, looked pretty good in this game. And the Chiefs, yet again, can't keep getting away with it. Their pursuit of looking as mid as possible every week before winning. They are 10-1 on the season, and they are 8-0 in one-score games.
How many times do we as NFL fans have to watch Patrick Mahomes just jaunt down the field and no defender seems interested in tackling him? Like, that game-winning, it's a 33-yard run to set up the game-winning field goal. He's just, out for a stroll. And every Panthers defender is just like, oh, he's going to go out of bounds. I can't touch him. And then he just keeps running. Mahomes is like the number 1 QB of all time at abusing the fact that defenders can't touch quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's he's the master at it. And getting out into space, looking like you're going to slide at any moment, looking like you're going to go out of bounds, then continuing to run up the sideline for 7 more extra yards, and the defenders just watch. It's very frustrating, but the funny thing about this game is that the Chiefs, and they start the 4th quarter, they're leading by 11 points. No one really is thinking this is going to unfold like this, and yet it does. And the Panthers have a great, valiant drive late in that game. They need to get the 2-point conversion, and they get it. Tied at 27, then the Chiefs go right down and stake them through the heart. There were my one note on this game. There were a lot of Chiefs fans in that stadium, and I know that this is somewhat of we got the Golden State Warriors thing where there's just now infinite bandwagon fans that have popped up from all over. But I'm looking at that and I'm like, wow, I didn't know there were so many Kansas City people that relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina. But that was a very red looking stadium.
Yeah,
And
it's like
also, of course, part of it is the fact that Panthers fans have probably
yeah.
burned all of their stuff and are
Season
crying
ticket
on
holders
every
just
Sunday.
got rid of
Yeah.
everything.
Not even bothering to show up. But honestly, give a shout out to the Panthers. They were on a 2-game win streak coming into this game, which, Saints and then Giants is not really an achievement necessarily, but considering a team that couldn't win any games, it is an achievement. And then you come out of your bye, give a scare to the Chiefs. You look at the rest of their season, it's a brutal schedule. Bucks, Eagles, Cowboys, Cardinals, Bucks, Falcons, but I bet they're going to win at least one or two of those games. And they seem to have a little bit of life now. And Bryce Young looking a little bit better. They have their draft pick this year. Maybe things are starting to angle upwards. I wouldn't be too optimistic if I'm a Panthers fan because David Tepper seems like a very unpleasant person and probably the new worst owner in the NFL with the removal of Daniel Snyder. And as long as you have an owner like that, you can't ever really be that optimistic, but finally, at least a little bit of vibes, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. He might just fire Canales because why not? Like, I wasn't it 2 straight years the Panthers had one and done coaches. Like,
I believe so, yes.
so Tepper is gonna ruin anything that they try to build. But Bryce Young, good for him. Glad he's looking better. That is a benching done right. They say, Bryce, let's take a step back. Let's let Andy Dalton go play a couple games. Dalton goes in, looks fine. Bryce is able to take a step back, reset, and has now looked very good. Like, he has looked competent. He's looked like an NFL starter in the last few games, which, considering how little there is around him, good for you. Now, I would like to laugh at the Panthers for a moment because you draft Jonathan Brooks in the second round, granted, coming off a torn ACL, but you also just extended Chuba Hubbard now midseason. What is. So you draft a running back in the second round to then make him your backup? Like, I don't know. Asset management's always funny. Anyways, moving on. Last week, we brought up this team and said that they have 2 very difficult games coming up on their schedule, but they have a game this week against a Packers team that they need to beat to stay in the playoff race. And then everyone got hurt. The San Francisco
On top
49ers.
of all of the other people that were already hurt.
Yeah. The San Francisco 49ers season is now on life support after they get just whatever semblance of their roster that was remaining gets destroyed by the Packers. For Green Bay fans, that was much needed because the 49ers have destroyed them over the years, as everyone knows. So now the 49ers are in a position where they basically have to run the table and win one of the Lions or Bills games if they can get healthy enough to even compete in those games.
Yeah, we said last week that the math game was looking pretty grim for San Francisco, and loss to Packers makes that even more grim. They are at Buffalo this week on Sunday Night Football. Unclear the situation with Brock Purdy. He had a second MRI on the shoulder, which I don't know. That doesn't seem great. It seems like a pretty up in the air situation with him. Obviously, if Purdy misses the Bills game, it's fairly difficult to see San Francisco winning that one. So then you're maybe 5-7, and at that point, you're hoping to finish 10-7 and hope the tiebreakers in the division get it done for you. It almost certainly won't get a wild card spot done. maybe it's possible, but this is a tough climb, and even finishing 10-7 and running the table requires beating the Lions, which it's at home, certainly possible. But they do have to go at the Dolphins as well. They have to go at the Cardinals and the Rams. Like there's really, unless you count Bears at home, which you could, there aren't really layups on this schedule. I don't know, man. This is getting down to like 20%, I feel like, to make the playoffs.
So if you're sitting in that 49ers front office right now, and Brock Purdy, let's say he's at 80% health, what how much consideration would you give to the idea of shutting him down for the season, making sure you finish last in the division, and then you get a higher draft pick next year? You can come back and you have a fourth place schedule.
There's a good case for it. The athletic model, by the way, 14% now for San Francisco to make the playoffs. I think there's a good argument because you have the rather than trying to push this extremely uphill climb, you can just put it in the tank, take that fourth place, get the easy schedule next year, get the 13th pick in the NFL draft, add to your roster and kind of replenish things a little bit. I think there's definitely an argument for it because this team just sort of looks mentally fatigued. Shanahan, after the game, I saw some of the press conference, not good. How sort of dismayed he looked. I guess you see how this week goes. If Purdy can't play against Buffalo and you get blasted by the Bills, then maybe that's the point you throw in the towel.
Yeah,
Not great.
we'll have to see. It's 2-8. Like obviously they make the Super Bowl last year, come very close to winning it, lose to the Chiefs again. And yeah, all the injuries have just added up throughout the season. Sort of just I don't know. It's not quite Super Bowl hangover, but it's just one of those cases where a lot of things went wrong and a lot of things compounded on top of that to add up to a pretty mediocre season. And you know, Lions fans were gonna get robbed of probably the rematch in the NFC Championship. Eh, oh well.
I'm not crying about that.
Yeah, I don't hate the 49ers enough. I coming into the season, I definitely wanted that because it would have been it would have been nice to have that be like, okay, we're back here again a year later, whatever. But hey, one team went one way, the other went a very different direction. So not too much you can do about it. You can only play the teams in front of you. Do you any other storylines that you want to mention?
uh, Briefly mentioned that the Titans beat the Texans.
Yep.
Houston continues to look not good, unserious, whatever you want to call it. Don't really look like a contender. Will Levis engineers a win in that game. He also throws one of the worst pick sixes you will ever see, and takes 8 sacks. Eight
Seven
sacks for 41
seven in the
yards.
first half. Like and we also got, at the start of the season we had a highlight reel of Will Levis funny moments. We got another one in this game where he throws a pick six and just the most aggressive head down sprint to not catch the guy that you'll see in the NFL this season. Yeah, Will Levis continues to be a great source of comedy. The Texans, they are not good at this point.
It will
Very
probably still make the playoffs, but
yeah.
I will note that their remaining schedule, they do play the Chiefs and the Ravens, so maybe you're looking at 9-8, which still probably gets you in because
Yeah,
competition. But
which AFC South team is matching 9-8?
maybe the Colts. They play Titans, Giants, Jags, Pats. That could get them to 9-8. I don't know who would have the tie break. Texans would have the tie break. So yeah, probably not happening. Texans are probably in regardless. So
Meh.
that's not a promising looking thing. Stroud, by the way, safety at the end of the game where he runs out the back of the end zone.
Shout
Must
out
be
Dan.
noted. Yeah, Seattle 16-6 over Arizona. Seahawks now lead the NFC West. Long way to go in that battle between a lot of very similar teams. We'll see what happens. My final note, or two final notes. Bummer for Brandon Graham. out for the year for the
Yeah.
Eagles after having one of the great games of the year. Really
Mhm.
sucks, especially because it was said that it was going to be his final
Is
season, I
yeah.
believe. So,
I don't know if you
real bummer.
saw that press conference, but it was he so casually was just like, yeah, I'm out for the year, and all the reporters in the room are like, what? Like what happens? Oh yeah, I tore my tricep, and they're all like, what? You did what? Because it's like, why would a player that just learned he's out for the season do a media availability? But he's just like, oh yeah, arm, I'm done. Everyone was so confused. It was like, oh, that sucks, man. It's but no, that I hope that's not the end of his story, because he is one of the great Philadelphia Eagles pass rushers. He's had a great career there, has a Super Bowl ring there. Like he for
One of
and
the
for
more
Eagles,
underrated
yeah,
players of his era. Like, wasn't a guy that went to a ton of Pro Bowls or All Pro nominations, but really good player for a really long time. Native Michigander, Michigan product, was a bright light on some extremely grim Rich Rod era defenses. So always want the best for him. Big bummer there. Final note: Browns and Steelers played a great weather game.
yeah,
Might end up
that
being the weather game of the year. I always enjoy weather games, so that was enjoyable to watch. Pittsburgh, we called them contenders, and then immediately they lose to the Browns.
that's our
How
fault.
it
We did
goes.
that. But yeah, no, that was fun to watch. It was also fun because the game starts. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of snow coming down, and as that game progressed, it just progressively became worse and worse. And by worse, I mean better, because
Yep.
anytime you can get a full whiteout game, it's just great to watch. Jameis Winston, the funniest quarterback of all time, with his interviews, just talking about how much fun the snow is. Um, I guess aside from that, back to the Eagles real quick. Saquon Barkley, my lord, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, and add another 40. Like, he had 302 all-purpose yards against the Rams. He is now leading the league in rushing yards, barring Derrick Henry doing something equally as brilliant tonight. Yeah, he might hit 2,000 yards this season.
He should be the MVP, right? Like,
Yeah,
I know we've decided that the MVP is a quarterback's award and uh, offensive player of the year is the skill position award, but like, I don't know, man. He's unbelievable, and I all I can say about all that is the Giants deserve to burn in hell for letting Saquon go to the Eagles. I've enjoyed seeing the Giants fans melting down online after that combination of getting just embarrassed by the Buccaneers, followed by watching the franchise player that they let walk in free agency for nothing, uh, just dominate on Sunday Night Football. Giants are in a bad place. That's what I will say about this situation.
yeah, vibes are certainly bad there. Dayball is probably on the way out. I mean, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, he was the coach of the year," but we forget that that Giants team was actually very fraudulent.
Oh yeah,
Like,
completely fraudulent.
I think we forget that because they beat the Like, some people forget that because they beat the Vikings in the playoffs, who were even more fraudulent.
It was
Like,
the fraud bowl.
yeah, they congrats, you beat the Paper Tigers. Like, I don't know, that was a bad game. That year was bad for NFL playoffs.
It was that was brutal. I mean, the Lions were 9-8, and by the time the playoffs rolled around, they were clearly better than three of the seven playoff teams.
Yeah, because the Seahawks got just thrashed by the Niners that year. Like, yeah, is what it is. That's why the Lions had to step in and save everyone from this nonsense.
There you go.
Now, I will say that it's quite impressive, the jump in quality and of back and production the Eagles have gotten going from DeAndre Swift to Saquon Barkley. I didn't think the gap was that wide. Like, I thought, like, obviously Saquon's a much more talented back. I did not think it was to this degree.
Well, speaking of DeAndre Swift, he will
And
be
and that's how we
making a
transition.
homecoming this week.
Yep, the DeAndre Swift revenge game that everyone is not bracing for, because if DeAndre Swift actually has a revenge game, it would be quite surprising. The Lions and Bears, Thanksgiving. I'll let you kick this off because Thanksgiving, this is coming into the year. You have had this game circled for a long, long time. What needs to happen for the Lions to finally break the Thanksgiving Day curse?
Honestly, I don't care how it happens. They just need to win the game. If it requires a bad offensive game and 3 pick sixes, I don't care. Whatever. 2 return touchdowns does not matter. Scoop and score, whatever. They just need to win this game. And I think they probably know that. I mean, Dan Campbell played for the Lions. He knows the aura of the Thanksgiving game. 0-3 to start the career, and all three were varying shades of frustrating. The Bears game in 2021 was probably the worst coached game of that inaugural season. It got a lot of national people firing off takes that in hindsight were bad, but it was not a pretty showing. Then the next year they have the Bills in a good place, almost pulled that one off, and then Allen goes down the field, wins it for the Bills. And then last year, again, very frustrating game. A lot of turnovers, very bad defense played. It just was not good. So overall, this is something they need to get right. They need to win this game. You have the Bears. Yes, the Bears are not that bad of a team. They're fairly dangerous. They have some reasons for optimism, but at the same time, they're going to have a losing record. You could end up having 14 wins. Like, you're at home. Just got to get it done. That's my perspective on it. And the Lions are certainly a better team than the Bears.
Yeah, classic case of a pretty good team going up against a great team, in which, yeah, there is a better than 0% chance. I'd say a 40 to 45% chance the Bears can do something, pull something out of their hat. They have Jared Goff's number for whatever reason. You could chalk it up to the type of coverage they play, the linebacker play, various reasons, but they have going back to his Rams days. The Bears have just always had Goff's number. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I mean, the saving grace is David Montgomery, who is revved up for this game. He was talking after the game, and he was like, "It's always he's excited to play Chicago, to say the least." And the Bears have been susceptible to the run defensively this year, so that does bode well for the Lions. I will say as well, if the Lions split with the Bears, which again, quite possible, I would expect to lose the one in Chicago rather than the one in Detroit. So, because that'll be
the one in Chicago in just right before Christmas.
Yeah,
where there's a 5% chance you just get a snowball game. So, plus again, this is just one that the Lions have to be jazzed up for. They have to be excited to win this game and to compete in here. And you look at this season for the Bears, their defense better than the offense. The defense hasn't been incredible though. They're good, but they're not as dominant as I think some people hoped for. They do have some individually really good players. Sweat, Byer, Jalen Johnson are the ones that I kind of have written down there, but the linebackers haven't been as good. Stevenson, the other corner, not as sharp this season, and the offense has just been pretty poor overall this year. They're 26th in total offense coming into this game. They can't really run it. DeAndre Swift under 4 yards per carry. Roschon Johnson under 3 yards per carry. Caleb Williams 62% completion, 6 yards an attempt, 11 touchdowns, 5 picks, 44 sacks, minus 298 yards.
I gotta check in on my prediction. Hold on.
The key here is Zach Williams, put him behind the sticks and contain him. And we don't want to see a repeat of games against Justin Fields where Fields ran for 1,000,000 yards on the Lions up and down the field. Keep Williams in the pocket. Take his coverage sacks when he gets them to you. Just get it done that way. That's a take.
We are 5 yards off. Caleb Williams has lost 298 sack yards this season. CJ Stroud has lost 303. We are so close to greatness. But no, in all seriousness, this is the type of game that the Lions could end up with 6 sacks because the Bears' interior offensive line is terrible. The Lions' interior defensive line is great. Ali McNeil should feast. Again, DJ Reader should destroy everything that goes up the middle. Again, Levi Onwuzurike should do some good things again. Zadarius Smith on stunts and when he lines up over a guard. Now, as for Swift, he's under 4 yards a carry. His range of outcomes, though, has not been 3.8 yards a carry, whatever. It has been either 6 yards a carry or 1 yard a carry. There's not been much of an in between. The Lions have really shut down the likes of Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon. Travis Etienne is not as good as those guys, but he's still a talented back that they completely shut down. You expect DeAndre Swift to be held under 3.5 a carry in this game. Caleb Williams might extend some plays with his legs. He also might run himself into some trouble because he does that. It is funny that he carried over that trait from Justin Fields of just holding onto the ball for an eternity. Like, that's just Bears curse.
I will say about this offense, they have the name brand power among their wide receivers, but they haven't played that great. Like, if you look at, they haven't been super prolific. The passing game's been pretty poor overall, but also just look at like the PFF grading. None of them are grading out all that well. I know Odunze has had a bit of a difficult adjustment, and Keenan Allen's on the older side. So DJ Moore is the one I'm the most locked in on in terms of being most likely to erupt in this game. But overall, the Lions are definitely better than the Bears. They're at home. Just got to find a way to get it done, and then hopefully after that you get the week to then prepare for the Packers, who is also on a Thursday, and then after that you get the 12 or whatever days it is to get ready for the Bills. So at that point you can rest up more. Just got to get through this one. My final note on Thanksgiving: what is your watching situation like for this game? Like, it's another day in the week on a regular Thursday.
As a Canadian, no, actually, so my family friend group, we always get together for American Thanksgiving, because we kick all the girls out and we say it's a day for the guys. We have one of my family friends, we call him Boogie. He's going to the butcher either today or tomorrow to pick up some sort of pork. I think we're gonna do some pulled pork sandwiches, pork belly, all kinds of. We just throw a bunch of meat on the smoker. A few years ago, we had fresh elk that had been hunted a couple days before.
Okay.
Like we don't do turkey because we'll leave that for our own Thanksgiving, and you guys do that down there. We did do a deep fried turkey once. That was pretty good, but we experiment with a bunch of different meats.
Honestly, I'm all for that. This is my controversial take, but I've always been of the belief that turkey's pretty overrated, and that Thanksgiving food in general is overrated. I would much rather have a barbecue meal than than any white meat turkey or dark meat turkey with. Anyway, I don't want to get canceled for my Thanksgiving food takes.
Honestly, I do agree. That's what the deep fried turkey I think is the way to go, because you at least can bathe it in so much oil that it retains some of its moisture and doesn't dry out so much.
Yeah. But it's as a kid, I went to at least 3 Lions Thanksgiving games when we had season tickets. I probably more than that, but I remember the one against the Dolphins when the Dolphins had Nick Saban and Joey Harrington came back and destroyed the Lions on Thanksgiving. I remember one against the Falcons with Michael Vick. I remember one against the Packers with Favre. Not great memories. And then we went back in 2014 when the Lions were playing the Bears, and the Bears were bad, the Lions were good, and finally got to see a win on Thanksgiving. But there's been 2 distinct periods in my life where we just can never win on Thanksgiving, right? Like, there was the losing streak from the 90s to 2012. Then we had the 4-game win streak from 13 to 16. And now it's been back on another eternal losing streak on Thanksgiving. So my big desire is to win this one, finally get that break that negative streak. And also, it's a really bad Thanksgiving slate of games. Like, I know they're trying to hype up the Dolphins, Packers, which I'm not really buying, but As long as the Lions win, we're okay. And
I am
hopefully we get that.
I'm begging Tyreek Hill to finally have a classic Tyreek Hill game against the Packers on Thursday night there because, yeah, in Green Bay, we know that the Dolphins suck in the cold weather. I'm not looking forward to that. If it was in Miami, I could get hyped up for that. But in Green Bay, no way. So, and the only semblance of entertainment I'm going to get out of the Giants and Cowboys game is obscure bets. So I don't know anyone that's going to be hyped up for that. But yeah. So we're gonna wrap up the show there. Well, we recorded it on a Monday for you guys because the short week. I imagine we'll probably do the same with another short week next week. So make sure if I know that I'm in the minority being Canadian here. So all you Americans, enjoy your Thanksgiving. Hopefully the Lions can deliver a win. Enjoy the time with your families, and yeah. Hopefully the Thanksgiving Day slate won't be as bad as it looks on paper. So we'll see you next week. In the meantime, let's go Lions. Cheers, everyone.